Imagine standing in the center of $1 million ballroom, surrounded by the elite of high society, and you're the only one dressed like a neon mistake. My sister told me the theme was bold and modern, but as I stood by the service entrance in a dress 3 sizes too big, I realized she hadn't just stolen my dignity. She'd stolen my entire life. I thought I was there to celebrate her engagement to a billionaire. I didn't know that in 10 minutes, the woman holding the microphone would reveal a secret that would burn my family's facade to the ground. Before I tell you what happened, take a second to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who loves emotional stories about truth and justice. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. My name is Elena. For most of my life, I believed hard work would eventually speak for itself. I believed that if I studied longer, sacrificed more, and kept showing up even when nobody noticed, someday people would finally see me for who I was. I was wrong, because sometimes the loudest person in the room gets all the credit while the person doing the actual work becomes invisible. That was the story of my life, especially when it came to my sister Maya. Growing up, Maya was sunlight. At least that was how everyone described her. She was beautiful, charming, and somehow capable of making every conversation about herself without anyone realizing it. People loved being around her. They laughed at her jokes. They admired her confidence. They forgave every mistake she made. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the daughter who remembered birthdays, the daughter who paid bills, the daughter who fixed problems nobody else wanted to touch. When relatives visited our house, they would ask Maya about her exciting plans. Then they would turn to me and ask if I was still studying, as if my entire existence was a footnote. First, I didn't mind. I told myself it didn't matter. While Maya chased attention, I chased purpose. While she spent weekends at parties, I spent mine in libraries. While she collected compliments, I collected qualifications. I worked harder than anyone I knew. There were nights when I fell asleep at my desk with medical textbooks pressed against my face. There were mornings when I woke up before sunrise and continued studying before class. I missed vacations. I missed weddings. I missed entire years of my 20s. But eventually, all those sacrifices led somewhere. I became a neurosurgeon. The day I received my final certification, I stood alone in a hospital hallway and cried. Not because I wanted applause, not because I wanted recognition, but because I knew what it had cost. Every sleepless night, every missed opportunity, every moment I chose discipline over comfort. I had earned that achievement. Nobody could take it away from me, or so I thought. Around that same time, our father became seriously ill. For 6 months, the hospital became my second home. I worked my shifts and then spent my evenings sitting beside his bed. Sometimes he slept. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he simply stared out the window. I was there through all of it. The treatments, the setbacks, the endless uncertainty. Maya visited exactly 3 times. The first visit lasted 20 minutes. The second visit was long enough to take photos for social media. The third visit happened right before she flew to Bali. She posted a picture of a beach sunset with a caption about healing energy. Meanwhile, I was helping nurses change my father's bedding. But whenever family members talked about us, somehow Maya was still the devoted daughter. And I was just Elena. Reliable Elena. Practical Elena. Invisible Elena. Then one day Maya met Julian. The moment she mentioned his name, I could hear excitement in my mother's voice. Julian came from a family whose wealth stretched back generations. His grandfather had built a pharmaceutical empire. His family funded hospitals, universities, and research centers around the world. Their name appeared on buildings. Their influence opened doors. And Julian himself seemed surprisingly kind. The first time I met him, I expected arrogance. Instead, I found someone thoughtful and curious. He asked questions. He listened carefully. Most importantly, he genuinely respected scientific research. First, I was happy for Maya. I thought perhaps she had finally found someone who would encourage her to grow. What I didn't realize was that Maya had already started building a character, a completely fictional version of herself. And that character was based on me. It happened gradually, small details at first. She told Julian she had spent years helping medical researchers. Then she claimed she had participated in clinical studies. Then she started sharing stories. My stories. The nights I slept in hospital lounges. The challenges of patient care. The emotional weight of experimental treatments. Experiences I had lived through became stories she performed at dinner parties. The first time I noticed it, I laughed. I thought it was harmless. But then she became more specific. Much more specific. One evening during a family dinner, Julian mentioned a groundbreaking treatment program funded by his family's company. Before I could respond, Maya started describing the project in detail. Every challenge, every breakthrough, every obstacle. I sat there frozen, because she wasn't describing her experiences. She was describing mine. The exact clinical trial I had spent 3 years leading. The exact project that consumed countless nights of my life. Julian looked at her with admiration. My mother looked at her with pride. And nobody noticed me sitting silently at the same table. That should have been the moment I exposed everything. But I didn't. Partly because I hated confrontation. Partly because I assumed the lies would eventually collapse on their own. The truth seemed too obvious. Surely nobody could pretend forever. Surely reality would catch up. Instead, Maya became more confident. Every lie was rewarded. Every exaggeration earned praise. Every stolen achievement made her shine brighter. And with each passing month, I felt myself disappearing further into the background. Then came the engagement announcement. The event everyone would remember. The event that would change everything. The gala was being held at one of the most exclusive venues in the city. Politicians would attend. Business leaders would attend. Philanthropists and celebrities would attend. It wasn't just an engagement party. It was a public coronation. A celebration of Maya becoming part of one of the most powerful families in the country. My mother spent weeks talking about it. Every conversation revolved around decorations, guest lists, and appearances. Especially appearances. 3 days before the event, Maya arrived at my apartment carrying a garment bag. She looked unusually cheerful. The kind of cheerful that should have warned me. She placed the bag on my couch and smiled. "I had something special made for you," she said. "A custom design." I stared at her. "A custom design?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Trust me. You're going to stand out." At the time, I thought she meant it as a compliment. I had no idea how right she was. And I had no idea that inside that garment bag was the first piece of a humiliation carefully planned months in advance. The moment I unzipped it, my stomach dropped. I stood there staring at the dress. For a few seconds, I honestly thought it was some kind of joke. The fabric practically glowed. Electric blue. Not elegant blue. Not sophisticated blue. The kind of blue that looked like it belonged on a giant advertisement billboard. The material was shiny and cheap-looking despite Maya insisting it had been custom-made. The shoulders were enormous. The sleeves hung awkwardly. The entire thing looked several sizes too large. I looked from the dress to my sister, then back to the dress. "Maya, are you serious?" She laughed. "It's fashion, Elena. Not everything has to look like a hospital uniform." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her it was ridiculous. But years of being dismissed had trained me to doubt my own instincts. Maybe I just didn't understand fashion. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she was right. That was always the trap. Whenever Maya did something cruel, she wrapped it inside a joke. Whenever she crossed a line, she made me feel unreasonable for noticing. And somehow I always ended up apologizing. That night I tried the dress on. The moment I looked in the mirror, my heart sank. The shoulders drooped almost to my elbows. The waist hung awkwardly. The fabric swallowed my frame. I looked less like a guest and more like someone who had accidentally wandered into the event. I immediately called Maya. She answered on the second ring. "Well," she asked, "it doesn't fit." "Oh no." Her voice sounded concerned, but something about it felt rehearsed. "What do you mean it doesn't fit?" "It's huge." There was a brief pause. Then she sighed dramatically. "You're kidding." "No." "Oh, Elena. The seamstress must have made a mistake. What am I supposed to do?" Another pause. Then came the answer. "The event is in 2 days. There's no time to replace it." I closed my eyes. "Maya, please don't make this difficult. Everything is already stressful enough." There it was. The familiar guilt. The familiar pressure. The reminder that her problems always mattered more than mine. When I finally hung up, I sat alone in my apartment staring at the dress hanging from my closet door. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. But I couldn't prove it. So I convinced myself to endure it. Just one night. Few hours. Then it would be over. I had no idea that the dress was only the beginning. The evening of the gala arrived. The venue looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings. White roses filled massive arrangements throughout the ballroom. Soft golden lighting reflected from polished marble floors. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked perfect. Except me. The moment I stepped out of my car, I knew. Every guest entering the venue wore some variation of black, silver, ivory, or charcoal. Elegant, refined, timeless. And then there was me, a giant electric blue disaster. Heads turned immediately. People noticed. Of course they noticed. How could they not? I felt exposed before I even reached the entrance. Inside the ballroom it got worse. Far worse. Conversations slowed as I walked by. Eyes followed me. Some people tried to hide their reactions. Others didn't bother. I caught whispers. I caught smirks. One woman actually blinked twice as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The humiliation settled deep inside my chest. But I kept walking. Smile. Breathe. Keep moving. That was my strategy. Then I spotted my mother. Relief washed over me. At least she would help. At least she would understand. The moment she saw me, her expression changed. Not concern. Not sympathy. Embarrassment. Pure embarrassment. "Oh dear." That was the first thing she said. Not hello. Not "you look beautiful." Just 2 words. "Oh dear." My stomach tightened. "You see it too?" She glanced around nervously. "Keep your voice down." "Mom." "It's fine." "It isn't fine." She lowered her voice. "This is Maya's night." I stared at her. For a moment I genuinely thought I had misheard. Maya's night. Yes. Mom, look at me. I am looking. No. Actually, look. She did. Then she sighed. A long, exhausted sigh. The kind people use when they're tired of dealing with a problem. Just stay toward the back of the room. The words hit harder than they should have. Toward the back. People won't pay much attention. I couldn't speak. For a few seconds I simply stared at her. Then she adjusted the oversized collar of my dress, smiled weakly, and walked away. Just like that. As if the conversation was over. As if I was the inconvenience. I watched her disappear into the crowd, and suddenly I felt 10 years old again. The forgotten child. The overlooked daughter. The backup plan. The supporting character in Maya's story. An hour passed. Then another. The humiliation never stopped. At one point a photographer began organizing family photos. When he saw me, confusion crossed his face. "Could you stand slightly behind that plant?" I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Behind the plant? Just for balance. Balance. Right. I moved behind the enormous decorative palm tree while my family posed front and center. The photographer smiled. Perfect. Perfect. I nearly laughed. A world-famous neurosurgeon hidden behind a plant because her dress didn't match the room. If someone had told me this story years earlier, I wouldn't have believed it. But it was happening. And it kept getting worse. Every time Julian's parents approached, my mother subtly guided me away. Every time important guests arrived, I somehow ended up pushed toward corners, toward walls, toward exits, as if my very presence threatened the illusion Maya had built. And the strange thing was that nobody ever said it directly. Nobody announced it. Nobody admitted it. But I could feel it. The silent agreement. The understanding shared by everyone except me. Stay out of the way. Stay invisible. Stay in the back. Around 9 o'clock, I escaped to the buffet area. It was quieter there. Far enough away from the crowd that I could finally breathe. I grabbed a glass of water and stood alone. That's when I heard Maya's voice. First I wasn't paying attention. Then I heard another voice. An older woman. Sharp. Elegant. Powerful. I turned slightly and instantly recognized her. Mrs. Montgomery. Julian's grandmother. The real power behind the family empire. The woman whose approval mattered more than anyone else's. Maya was standing beside her, smiling, performing, playing the role she had perfected for years. I should have walked away. I should have ignored the conversation. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was. And within seconds, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Something that changed everything. Because Maya wasn't just telling another harmless exaggeration. She was stealing the most important years of my life. And this time she was doing it in front of the one person whose opinion could change all of our futures forever. The moment those words left her mouth, I knew I could never pretend it was harmless again. I just didn't realize that someone else was listening too. I stayed perfectly still. The glass of water in my hand suddenly felt heavier. Every instinct told me to walk away. But something kept me rooted to that spot. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe it was the simple fact that I was tired of watching my own life being handed to someone else. Mrs. Montgomery stood with one hand resting on an elegant silver cane. Even from a distance, there was something commanding about her. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. People naturally listened when she spoke. Maya, on the other hand, looked radiant. She was wearing a stunning ivory gown. Every detail had been carefully chosen. Every strand of hair was perfectly in place. She looked exactly like the future wife of a billionaire heir. And judging by the admiration in Mrs. Montgomery's eyes, Maya knew it. Then she started talking. It was the hardest period of my life, Maya said softly. Mrs. Montgomery nodded. The research years? Maya sighed dramatically. Yes. My stomach dropped. Research years. Not her research years. Mine. The clinical trials nearly broke me. I felt my grip tighten around the glass. Those trials had consumed 3 years of my life. 3 years. 3 years of 18-hour days. 3 years of constant pressure. 3 years of responsibility that affected real human lives. And Maya was talking about them as if she had been there. As if she had suffered. As if she had sacrificed. Mrs. Montgomery listened carefully. Maya continued. There were nights I slept on the floor of the clinic. Lie. I barely saw my family. Lie. I missed holidays because I couldn't abandon the patients. Lie. 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 Every sentence felt like a knife. Not because she was stealing credit. Because she was stealing pain. The sacrifices. The loneliness. The moments nobody else saw. Those experiences belonged to me. I had earned every one of them. Yet here she was selling them like stories at a dinner party. Mrs. Montgomery looked impressed. I imagine that required tremendous dedication. Maya lowered her eyes modestly. It was worth it if it helped save lives. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. The performance was flawless. The humility, the emotion, the carefully controlled pauses. If I didn't know the truth, I probably would have believed her too. That's what frightened me most. The lies sounded real because they were built from reality. My reality. For several seconds I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just listened. Then Mrs. Montgomery asked a question. A simple question. One that changed everything. What inspired you to pursue that work? Maya smiled. And then she told a story. My story. The exact moment that had inspired me to become a doctor. The exact memory I had shared years ago during a family dinner. The exact words. The exact details. The exact emotions. She remembered every piece of it. And she delivered it perfectly. My chest tightened. Suddenly I wasn't angry anymore. I was heartbroken. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't harmless exaggeration. She had studied my life, collected pieces of it, then rebuilt herself using my experiences. And everyone loved her for it. When the conversation ended, Mrs. Montgomery squeezed Maya's hand. I'm proud Julian chose someone with your character. Maya smiled. Thank you. The older woman walked away. And I stood frozen. Character. The word echoed inside my head. Character. The irony was almost unbearable. I looked across the ballroom. My family surrounded Maya. Laughing. Celebrating. Admiring. The future bride. The future Montgomery. Nobody questioned anything. Nobody doubted anything. Because lies are easy to believe when they're wrapped inside beauty and confidence. I should have stayed quiet. That's what I always did. That's what everyone expected. But something inside me finally snapped. Not dramatically. Not explosively. Quietly. Like a rope that had been stretched too far for too long. I walked directly toward Maya. My heart pounded harder with every step. The crowd blurred around me. The music faded. All I could see was her. When I finally reached her, she turned and smiled. For a second, she looked surprised. Then her expression settled into calm confidence. Elena, we need to talk. Her smile didn't move. Now. She glanced around. A few nearby guests noticed the tension immediately. Still smiling, Maya gently took my arm and guided me toward a quieter section of the ballroom. The moment we were alone, I spoke. What are you doing? Her expression remained innocent. What do you mean? Stop. Stop what? The lies. For the first time, a tiny flicker appeared in her eyes. Not guilt. Not shame. Annoyance. As if I were interrupting something important. I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Montgomery. What about her? You told her my stories. Maya crossed her arms. Oh, just one word. Oh, as if the entire thing were insignificant. You admitted it. I admitted nothing. You described my clinical trials. She shrugged. We're sisters. I stared at her. We share experiences. No. We don't. The smile disappeared. Finally. Only slightly. But enough. Elena, why are you doing this tonight? Doing what? This. She gestured vaguely toward me. Toward my frustration. Toward my existence. Making everything about yourself. The words hit harder than I expected. Because she genuinely believed them. Or at least she wanted me to think she did. I shook my head. You stole my work. No. You stole my life. You're being dramatic. That word. Dramatic. My entire life people had used that word whenever I objected to being treated unfairly. Whenever I defended myself. Whenever I refused to disappear quietly. Dramatic. Maya stepped closer. Lowered her voice. And smiled. The kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Then she looked at my dress. Slowly, deliberately, from head to toe. and laughed softly. Look at yourself. I felt heat rise into my face. What? You're standing in the middle of one of the most important events of my life dressed like that. I didn't answer. She adjusted the oversized shoulder of the electric blue dress, just as she had planned from the beginning. Then she whispered something I will never forget. This is why people believe me. The room seemed to stop. For a moment I couldn't breathe. She continued. This is why people admire me. Her voice was calm, confident, cruel. Because when people look at us, they see someone successful. She pointed subtly toward herself. And someone unstable. Then she pointed toward me. The words landed like physical blows. Not because they were true. Because she knew exactly where to aim. Every insecurity, every doubt, every wound. She had spent years learning them. And now she was using them. I stepped back. Maya smiled again. Victorious. Go get some water, Elena. I stared at her. You're embarrassing yourself. Then she walked away. Just like that. No apology. No guilt. No hesitation. She simply returned to the crowd. Returned to the celebration. Returned to the life she had built using pieces of mine. I remained where I was. Completely still. The noise of the ballroom returned around me. Laughter. Music. Conversation. But it all felt distant. For the first time that night, I seriously considered leaving. Not because I was defeated. Because I was exhausted. Deeply exhausted. I had spent years trying to earn respect. Years trying to be patient. Years trying to take the high road. And what had it achieved? Nothing. I was standing alone in a ridiculous dress while my sister accepted praise for accomplishments she had never earned. Maybe it was time to stop fighting. Maybe it was time to walk away. I reached into my purse, pulled out my car keys, and headed toward the exit. What I didn't know was that someone had been watching everything. Not just the lies. Not just the confrontation. Everything. And in less than 10 minutes, that person would walk onto the stage and destroy the illusion my family had spent years protecting. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor as I headed toward the exit. I wasn't crying. Surprisingly, I had moved beyond tears. I felt empty. Completely empty. The kind of emptiness that comes after years of disappointment finally catch up to you. The ballroom behind me was alive with celebration. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter echoed through the room. Music floated from the orchestra near the stage. Everyone was celebrating a future that had been built on lies. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to let it happen. I tightened my grip around my car keys. One more minute. That was all. One more minute and I would be gone. Gone from the gala. Gone from the humiliation. Gone from Maya. Gone from all of it. Then I heard a voice. Leaving already? I turned. Standing beside me was Mrs. Montgomery. For a moment I thought she was speaking to someone else. Then I realized she was looking directly at me. Not at my dress. Not at my awkward appearance. At me. I forced a polite smile. I have an early shift tomorrow. A lie. She knew it. I knew it. Neither of us acknowledged it. Mrs. Montgomery studied me for several seconds. There was something unsettling about her gaze. Not because it was harsh. Because it was observant. She noticed things. The things other people ignored. The things other people pretended not to see. A strange choice of color for a lead neurosurgeon. I looked down at the electric blue dress. My face burned. It wasn't exactly my choice. I assumed as much. The answer surprised me. I looked up. Mrs. Montgomery's expression remained calm, but there was something behind it. Something sharp. Something calculating. You know who I am? I asked quietly. She almost smiled. Of course I do. I stared at her. She continued. When someone contributes to medical research that receives foundation funding, I learn their name. For a moment I couldn't speak. She knew. Not just my name. My work. My actual work. The realization hit me like a wave. While my own family ignored my achievements, a stranger had noticed. Mrs. Montgomery rested both hands on her cane. I know which trials you led. My heart started racing. I know which papers you authored. I swallowed hard. And I know exactly who spent 3 years in that laboratory. The air seemed to disappear from my lungs. For the first time all evening, someone was acknowledging reality. Not Maya's version. Reality. Mrs. Montgomery glanced across the ballroom toward the crowd. I've been watching. A chill ran through me. Watching. Noticing. Seeing. All the things nobody else had done. I saw where they seated you. Her voice remained calm. I saw how your mother introduced guests to Maya while barely mentioning you. My throat tightened. I saw the photographs. I remembered standing behind the giant palm tree. The humiliation. The embarrassment. The isolation. Mrs. Montgomery had seen that too. Most people would have ignored it. She hadn't. Then she said something that completely stunned me. And I saw your sister adjust that dress before she humiliated you. My eyes widened. So she had witnessed the confrontation. The realization made my heart pound harder. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The sounds of the ballroom filled the silence. Finally I shook my head. It doesn't matter. Mrs. Montgomery raised an eyebrow. It doesn't. No. I laughed bitterly. It never matters. The words came out before I could stop them. Years of frustration. Years of disappointment. Years of invisibility. All packed into 3 simple words. Mrs. Montgomery watched me carefully. Then she asked a question. Do you truly believe that? I opened my mouth, then stopped. 'Cause I didn't know. Part of me believed it. Part of me had spent years believing it. That hard work didn't matter. That truth didn't matter. That people only cared about appearances. Maya certainly seemed to prove it. Mrs. Montgomery nodded slowly, as if she understood exactly what I was thinking. Then she surprised me again. Come with me. I blinked. What? Come with me. I looked toward the stage. The event program was about to begin. Guests were finding their seats. Servers moved through the room carrying trays of champagne. Something important was happening. I could feel it. I don't think that's a good idea. Mrs. Montgomery's eyes sharpened. I wasn't asking. For the first time that evening, a tiny smile appeared on my face. She turned and began walking toward the stage. And somehow I found myself following. Every step increased the knot in my stomach. Something was happening. Something big. The closer we got to the stage, the quieter the room became. People noticed Mrs. Montgomery immediately. Conversations stopped. Guests turned. Heads followed her movement. Power has a strange effect on people. You can feel it before a word is spoken. By the time she reached the stage, nearly the entire ballroom was watching. Maya noticed too. Her face lit up instantly. Of course it did. She probably assumed this was her moment. A public blessing. A family endorsement. Another step toward becoming Mrs. Julian Montgomery. Julian stood beside her smiling. My mother looked excited. Everything was unfolding exactly as they expected. At least for the moment. Mrs. Montgomery climbed the stage stairs slowly. A staff member handed her a microphone. The room fell silent. Completely silent. Hundreds of people waiting for her to speak. I remained near the side of the ballroom, still wearing the ridiculous electric blue dress, still feeling completely out of place. Then Mrs. Montgomery spoke. Good evening. Her voice carried effortlessly through the room. A warm ripple of applause followed. She waited for silence again, then continued. Tonight is supposed to be a celebration. More smiles. More nods. Maya practically glowed. This evening represents the joining of 2 families. Another round of applause. Julian reached for Maya's hand. Everything looked perfect, beautiful, elegant, flawless. Then Mrs. Montgomery's tone changed. Very slightly, but enough. A successful union requires many things. The room grew quieter. Trust, silence, integrity, more silence, and truth. The atmosphere shifted instantly. I felt it. Everyone felt it. Maya's smile weakened. Only slightly, but I noticed. Mrs. Montgomery looked directly at the audience, then continued, "Because no foundation can stand on sand." Now the room was completely still. Guests exchanged confused glances. Nobody understood where this was going. Not yet. Mrs. Montgomery slowly turned toward Maya, then toward Julian, then toward the crowd. "My grandson believes he is marrying a woman defined by sacrifice, scientific achievement, and extraordinary dedication." Maya smiled nervously. Julian looked confused. My heart hammered against my ribs. Something was happening. Something nobody expected. Then Mrs. Montgomery pointed her cane toward the back of the ballroom. Toward me. Every head in the room turned. Hundreds of eyes suddenly locked onto the woman in the electric blue dress. Me. And then Mrs. Montgomery delivered the sentence that shattered the entire evening. "The problem is that the woman who fits that description is not standing on this stage." The silence that followed felt endless. You could have heard a single pin drop. Maya's face lost all color. Julian froze. My mother looked horrified. And I stood motionless as Mrs. Montgomery's gaze settled directly on me. Then she spoke 4 words that changed my life forever. "Elena, come forward." For a moment I couldn't move. It felt as though the entire ballroom had stopped breathing. Hundreds of faces were staring at me. The woman in the electric blue dress. The woman everyone had spent the entire evening trying to hide. The woman standing near the service exit as if she didn't belong. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Elena, come forward." Mrs. Montgomery repeated the words calmly. This time there was no mistaking it. She meant me. I looked around the room. No one looked away. No one spoke. No one moved. For the first time all night, nobody was looking at Maya. They were looking at me. I took a slow breath. Then another. And I started walking. The sound of the oversized dress swishing against itself echoed through the silence. Step by step, I crossed the ballroom. People shifted aside. A path opened through the crowd. I could feel every eye following me. Halfway to the stage, I felt someone grab my arm. My mother. Her fingers tightened around my wrist. "Elena." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I turned. The panic in her eyes shocked me. "Don't do this." I stared at her. For years I had obeyed her. For years I had accepted being second. For years I had stayed quiet to keep the peace. And where had it gotten me? Hidden behind plants. Ignored at family gatherings. Erased from my own achievements. "Don't ruin this," she whispered. "Ruin this." The words settled heavily in my chest. Not once had she asked whether I was okay. Not once had she asked whether Maya had lied. Not once had she cared about the truth. Only the image. Only the performance. Only the illusion. Slowly, I removed her hand from my arm. Then I continued walking. I didn't look back. When I reached the stage, Mrs. Montgomery offered me her hand. I stepped up beside her. Across from us stood Maya and Julian. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Maya looked terrified. Julian looked confused. Mrs. Montgomery faced the audience. "Many of you know that our foundation supports medical research around the world." The crowd listened carefully. She continued, "Before investing millions into any project, I make it my business to know exactly who is responsible for the work." Maya swallowed hard. I saw it. Everyone saw it. Mrs. Montgomery turned toward Maya. "Tell us something." The room became impossibly quiet. You often speak about leading the neurological stabilization trials. Maya forced a smile. Yes. Wonderful. Mrs. Montgomery nodded. Then perhaps you can answer a simple question. A bead of sweat appeared near Maya's temple. My stomach tightened. The moment had arrived. What was the primary stabilizer used during phase 3 of the trial? Silence. Complete silence. Maya blinked. Then blinked again. The confident woman who had spent years pretending suddenly looked lost. Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced toward Julian, then toward my mother, then toward me, looking for rescue, looking for answers, finding none. Finally she spoke. That information is proprietary. The excuse sounded weak the second it left her mouth. Mrs. Montgomery didn't react. She simply looked at me. Elena. My voice came out calm, steady, stronger than I expected. Saline-based suspension combined with a protein inhibitor. The crowd remained silent. I continued. The formula was modified after phase 2 showed instability in long-term testing. Several doctors in the audience nodded immediately. Recognition spread across their faces. They knew. They understood. I wasn't guessing. I knew because I had lived it. Mrs. Montgomery smiled slightly. Exactly. Then she turned back toward Maya. The silence became unbearable. Julian's face changed. The confusion was gone now. In its place was realization and disappointment. A deep disappointment that seemed to age him in seconds. Mrs. Montgomery wasn't finished. She addressed the audience again. The person responsible for those trials is standing beside me. Every eye returned to me. She authored the research. Another pause. She led the team. Another pause. She earned the recognition. The room erupted into whispers. Suddenly everyone was talking. Everything Maya had built was collapsing in real time. I looked at my sister. For years she had always known exactly what to say. Always known how to control a room. Always known how to manipulate a conversation. Now she looked completely helpless. Because the truth has a strange power. A lie requires constant maintenance. The truth only needs exposure. Julian stepped forward. Maya. His voice was quiet. She immediately reached for him. Julian, I can explain. But even she sounded unsure. He looked at her for several long seconds. Then he asked a question that cut through the room. How much of it was true? Maya didn't answer. That silence answered everything. Julian closed his eyes. For a moment he looked genuinely heartbroken. Not angry. Heartbroken. Because he hadn't just lost trust in his fiancée. He had lost trust in the person he thought she was. Slowly, he removed the boutonniere from his jacket. The gesture seemed small, but everyone understood what it meant. He placed it carefully on a nearby table. Then he looked at Maya one last time. I'm sorry. And he walked away. Just like that. No shouting. No dramatic argument. No public humiliation. Just quiet finality. The engagement was over. Maya stared after him in disbelief, as if she couldn't understand how quickly everything had disappeared. My mother rushed to her side. Panic spread across her face. Soon they were both talking at once, trying to explain, trying to blame, trying to save something that could no longer be saved. But nobody was listening anymore, because the performance was finished, and the audience had finally seen behind the curtain. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People approached me. Researchers, doctors, board members, people who knew my work, people who had respected me for years without ever realizing who I was connected to. For the first time, I wasn't being introduced as Maya's sister. I was simply Elena, and that felt incredible. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages, calls, texts, voicemails, some angry, some apologetic, some desperate. I ignored them all. For the first time in my life, I chose peace over guilt. I blocked Maya. I blocked my mother. And then I moved forward. 6 months later, Mrs. Montgomery offered me a position leading a major research institute funded by the foundation. I accepted, not because of revenge, not because of vindication, because I had earned it. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every challenge, every moment of perseverance, I had earned it. Sometimes people still ask about that engagement gala. Sometimes they ask if I regret what happened. I always give the same answer. No, because nothing ended that night. Something finally began. I stopped shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. I stopped apologizing for existing. I stopped letting others tell my story for me. And most importantly, I learned that being overlooked does not mean being unworthy. Sometimes the world simply hasn't noticed you yet. The electric blue dress still hangs in the back of a closet. Kept it, not because I like it, not because it reminds me of pain, but because it reminds me of the night everything changed. The night a dress meant to humiliate me became the thing everyone remembered. The night the truth finally walked into the spotlight. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever watched someone else take credit for your hard work, if you've ever been told to stay quiet, stay small, or stay in the back, remember this. The truth doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to beg. It doesn't need to fight for attention. It only needs the right moment. And when that moment comes, no lie is strong enough to stand against it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories of betrayal, justice, and unforgettable karma. And tell me in the comments one word that describes how you felt at the ending. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.